This video is brought to you by Bono. Readers, when it comes to Disney Pixar's dream productions from the world of Inside Out, this could have been a movie. Yes, it was filmed in that reality documentary style that became incredibly famous after The Office, and it did succeed in adding a certain charm to the series as well. But just like Moana 2 was the result of Disney deciding to turn a mini-series intended for Disney Plus into a worldwide theatrically released movie, the pacing and both the development and attention to character of Dream Productions' 4 half-hour episodes felt like this was the result of Disney deciding to turn a worldwide theatrically released movie into a mini-series intended for Disney Plus. Now, I'm not saying Win or Lose, the Pixar show that I know was always intended to be a show, is going to lack that quality when it's released. And trust me, we are going to talk about Win or Lose for a little bit in this video. I'm just saying that once that association popped into my head, I began dwelling on the why. If it was supposed to be a movie to expand on the Inside Out franchise that got turned into a miniseries instead, what is it about Dream Productions' story or motif that Disney felt this should only be accessed through their streaming service paywall? Well, after sitting down and taking everything in, I think I know what Pixar was truly trying to peddle through the story if it was a movie with a globally theatrical release. And yes, if you know me, it's exactly what you think it is. Let's begin. Hey there, readers. Laron here, offering you analysis and perspective on your favorite tell them what causes you care about, and for this video, I want to let you know about Bono. Bono is an app that ensures your yearly donations to your favorite charities and organizations have the most impact possible. Sign up for the app with no commitment, choose your causes, and Bono will help you with a personalized donation plan with the associated charities. All of your donations are completely going toward the charity, so you don't have to worry about fees and whatnot eating away at your donation. And a summary of all of your donations for the year will be on one convenient receipt for you to make writing off your donations significantly easier come tax season. I've been on Bono for a while now, and I love that I could see the impact I was gonna make with my causes even before I made my first donation. And ever since I activated my plan, I've been receiving real-time updates from the charities and organizations working in those causes. Speaking of which, Bono always makes sure that the charities that they work with are not only legit, but are actually doing the work in the causes that you choose. Some of them I didn't even know existed until I signed up. LGBT services like Lambda Legal and Outright, respectively dealing in HIV/AIDS education and advocacy, and queer rights worldwide. And other causes, depending on the topic of future videos, I'll give a small shout out to some related charities. If you're looking for a one-stop shop when it comes to donating to good work around the world, then either scan the QR code on the screen right now, or use my affiliate link in the description below to sign up for Bono under my account so we can grow a community there. Part of the reason why I'm partnering with Bono is because after years of only stating analysis and opinions about the state of the world, I wanted to find a way to practice what I preach and put my money where my mouth is. Bono allows me to do that, and has offered me the ability to let those of you who want to as well do the same. So either scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description box below to sign up and help make this world a little bit better in any way we can together. Thanks again to Bono for teaming up with me. Now, on to the lesson. Pixar knows emotions. Even before Toy Story, Pixar found ways of getting us to see body language and emotions conveyed off a couple of desk lamps. So it only makes sense that they would succeed at showing that talent off in things that can actually translate said emotions and feelings. That's why the beginning of Finding Nemo is iconic. That's why Up's first few minutes breaks our heart every time. That's why we felt bad for Alberto despite him deciding to out Luca before he was ready to come out.
I knew this would happen. Monster!
And that's why all of WALL-E warms it and makes it whole again after we've picked up the pieces and put them all back together. But they wouldn't have gotten so good at knowing how to display, reveal, and expect emotions and emotional responses if they didn't already know what's behind the wheel of expert emotional responses. Subtlety. In order to be great at triggering emotional responses from your work to said audience, you have to be fantastic at subtly preparing your audience for an emotional turnout. Jesse's flashback in Toy Story 2, Arlo losing his dad in The Good Dinosaur, hell, everything leading up to Joy's breakdown in the memory dump in Inside Out. The way subtlety plays out across all of those films shows that they know how to implement it in ways to make even foreshadowed things be insignificant. And it's only because Pixar has this type of experience with subtlety that they were able to successfully release a mini-series-long critique of their parent company's inability to put personal growth before greed to millions of people on their very own platform right under their nose. Let's take into consideration the players. You have Paula, Janelle, Zenny, and Jean. Paula, similar to Joy, is one of the best directors Dream Productions ever had. She's had hit after hit in the past, but lately she's been out of touch with what Riley both wants and needs. Janelle is Paula's assistant director, who, at the beginning of the series, doesn't get the recognition she deserves as a creative. This goes especially for Paula, who just has a never-changing perception of her as someone who's only there to be both her personal yes and hype woman. But when she's promoted to an actual director and is able to place her artistic vision on something substantial in Riley's life, she becomes an overnight sensation and is now considered Paula's competition in regards to who will have the job at the studio in the future. Zenny is an independent filmmaker with nepotism powers because Jean, his aunt, is the head of the studio. He has very valid critiques about how Paula operates and how out of touch she is, but understands that he has to work with her if he ever wants his art to be taken seriously. Someone always takes credit for his plots and ideas that end up popular, but he's the first to be tossed to the side and used as a scapegoat if something goes wrong that may both directly and indirectly involve him. It's in these extremes that Paula and Zenny are meant to clash because they are complete polar opposites of each other. Paula is a fun director, and her definition of fun for Riley hasn't changed since she was a toddler.
Oh, why does she have to grow up?
Zenny knows this about Paula and reminds her that her past accomplishments and credentials have kept her blind to the evolution of both Riley and the studio itself, because Zenny is a proponent of exploring Riley's more honest and, dare I say, current desires, something that Janelle also wanted to tap into the moment she was promoted to director, but Paula never allowed, but also seemed to be going about it in a way that has a healthy medium of what both Paula and Zenny represent. This is because Paula and Zenny represent the respective extremes of the studio and the creative. Paula is the way the studio has been doing things for years, and Zenny is the force that challenges the system. And considering what happened to Zenny after the quote-unquote too many boyfriends dream and how that came about, more on that in a bit. There's no doubt that the force in question is the Caucasian bastardization of the term woke. And it was in me realizing this, as well as how the relationship between Paula and Janelle was depicted in the first episode, that I figured out that the characters Janelle, Zenny, and Paula are supposed to respectively represent Pixar, the incorporation of wokeness into modern day media, and Disney. That's because Dream Productions is a story Pixar told about how Disney stifles true art and creativity in a way that doesn't demonize them to where it might as well be a blatant side-by-side comparison allegory, especially when you remember the pivot Disney took after the big one-century celebration animated film Wish didn't take off like they expected. As I stated in my video about it, there were parts of it that felt stitched attached, portions of the story that felt AI generated, and bits of it that felt repeated from the studio's most recent works, all as if they were trying to meet a studio mandate. Then, when it failed, Disney shifted the blame to prioritizing messages instead of solely focusing on entertainment first being the problem. Watching Paula immediately throw Zenny under the bus after the sleepwalking incident is a perfect representation of that experience. Disney wanting to have their hands in how the art is created, causing it to be ill-received, and then immediately pointing the blame to the quote-unquote new thing they tried out as the one responsible for said experience, instead of the true reason being their own conservative-minded micromanaging of the project in the first place. And because of what she does, how she acts, what she represents, and how easy it is to compare her arc with what we've experienced about it, it's made abundantly clear via subtext that in this analogy, Paula is a personification of Walt Disney Studios. Considering all the changes Disney has been implementing on Pixar as of late, especially the recent decisions to 86 queer-affirming messages from their Disney Plus exclusive TV series Win or Lose, the comparison couldn't be any more easier to make unless you blatantly ignore the various acts and cries of social justice that's constantly seasoning our pop culture popcorn. But in order to sneak this past, Pixar had to give the Disney allegory a happy ending. They had to use their magic to show the world, it's not our fault, it's the execs, and we do a way better job if it was us up there, we promise, when it comes to characters and corporations like her. And they had to do it in a way that promoted that if they were the ones overseeing everything, we'd all thrive and get along. When in actuality, that just isn't true, Ellen. What was wild was that I was able to put together that Paula was Disney personified the moment I saw how her relationship with Janelle truly was. I immediately saw the studio that produces the hits and the small newly acquired studio that wants to produce stuff that's more in touch with modern audiences that cater to things that weren't in the focus of what consisted of patriarchal mainstream capitalism back in the day. And I saw it in the exact same order that situations like the ones Paula and Janelle ended up in operate. Even Zenny's role in it as the leftist extremist example to Paula's right to show that neutrality is Disney's end goal was kinda anticipated from me once I put things together. Dream Productions is a Pixar critique of Disney and how easily they will bend the knee to the status quo and stifle true creativity under the orders of the powers that be. But done in a way that when Disney sat down and watched it, they didn't leave the screening asking everyone's favorite line from Euphoria Season 2.
Wait, is this fucking play about us?
Now, do they succeed in applying Riley's queerness, both canonically in the Inside Out universe and in how one can interpret the events that they just watched into the show, despite the critique? Yes, they do. First, let's look at how Riley's feelings and dreams can be interpreted by someone watching the show. If you saw my video on Inside Out as a whole on my second channel, Readus 201, I'll link it here and at the end of this video, I'm kind of convinced that in-universe Riley is a victim of Disney not allowing a character to be queer on screen, but has no problem putting them up in front of Disney Plus banners during Pride Month. Because despite how much Disney wanted Pixar to make it look like Riley just admired her, it was obvious that Riley got butterflies for Val when they bumped into each other at hockey camp in Inside Out 2. A lot of decisions that were made under the influence of anxiety were made under the hope that Val would notice her, think highly of her, and feel like she can keep up. This was crush behavior. So when those of us who have this info about Riley that a lot of us looked into deeper when we watched Inside Out 2, go into a universally canonized story that takes place before the puberty alarm went off in the beginning of Inside Out 2, aka Dream Productions, a lot of us who looked into Riley's possible queerness deeper than what Disney wanted us to hoped to see it there was any way Pixar found a way to visually represent what it's like to start coming into one's own queerness, especially before puberty plays a factor. Because, and this might surprise some of you, so make sure you're sitting down before you hear what I have to say here, a lot of queer people have entertained queerness even before their hormones played a part in it, both in regards to gender and sexuality. That's why there's trans kids. That's why there's non-binary kids. That's why there's gay kids and bi kids, despite them only being in elementary school. But the reason we don't see that type of representation in children's programming is because same-sex attraction or anything outside of patriarchal heteronormativity is too adult a theme to incorporate into children's programming, according to one of their excuses, and reserves that type of talk for shows with that Avatar: The Last Airbender level of maturity. Dream Productions was in a sweet spot according to the franchise timeline that allowed this possibility to be explored if Disney weren't such chicken shits about only wanting a popular character of theirs to be queer when it only benefits them. And those of us who knew that Disney would do everything they could to get Riley's character ready for their Hays Code inspection, we knew that we could only rely on subtext and allegory to get our answers. Thankfully, Pixar keeps finding ways of confirming queer aspects about characters that Disney forces them to straightify, and Dream Productions was no exception. Because it's canonically known that Riley likes boys, the setup for Zenny to use the imaginary boyfriend that made it to cafe maturity to get her to entertain the idea of going to the dance with a date made sense. Then we get to the dream that was supposed to be a blockbuster hit, and we see the result of Paula and Zenny's fighting over the course of the dream. Riley suffering so much internalized frustration involving multiple variations of boys begging for her attention that she enters a limbo state and sleepwalks. She chooses none of the boys she created in her head and decides to go to the dance herself in the waking world. According to the very rules established in the show, this sleepwalking dream, despite it having the potential to be fatal, is an influential one. And considering the point of contention that caused her to sleepwalk in the first place was the fact that there were too many boys pieing for Riley's attention, who's to say that deciding not to go to the dance with a date was the only thing she took out of that dream? What if that was also the moment she started entertaining the idea of if she even likes boys like that? Of course, that's not the only dream Riley had that allowed us to see how we first experienced queerness via self-exploration and questioning things. The dream that Zenny wrote to sabotage Paula's last chance to impress the studio head after implementing mandates was incredibly relatable to a lot of people. That's because the version of Riley she aspires to be is a great visual indicator regarding how she views herself, how society views her, and who she wants to be versus if she's worthy of it. It's the reason why she's constantly trying to fight the presence of the unicorn, despite Paula constantly trying to use her to relive the past when things weren't so complicated. Yes, that was who she was, but it doesn't resonate with her anymore or represent who she currently is. Add everything about how the sleepwalking dream could even cause her to question if she even likes boys, and one could see this as a natural path Riley is walking in learning more about herself and who she is. Who is her ideal self without this one thing that everyone expects from her? How does she react when her ideal self critiques her for not going to the dance with a boy, just like she critiqued her for showing up in her mom's old dress like in Zenny's script? Considering that this happens before Inside Out 2, she could have been questioning all of these aspects about herself before Val even entered the picture. But even this comparison is handled in a way where through the subtext of the show, Pixar is illustrating to us that Disney would never allow such a self-examination to happen if there was even a chance Riley could be read off as queer. And they do this by having Paula, Janelle, and even Zenny himself realize what quote-unquote damage such a scenario would do to Riley if this dream aired. And because either nobody is prepared for her to deal with that form of existentialism so soon, or feels ready for her to make that big of a decision yet once everyone comes together to stop the studio head from moving forward with the script, the Disney allegory, the Pixar allegory, and the social justice allegory have to stop the dream and let Riley's lucid actions guide them into realizing that compromise among the three is quote-unquote necessary for her to function. And in this case, it's any type of existential thinking that could possibly lead to her examining her queerness before the beginning of Inside Out 2. Which is what Pixar had to do in order to keep Disney ignorant to the fact that this entire show is an ingenious protest to Disney itself. Once again, the reason why these are even valid interpretations of what Riley experienced in the first place is because queer people, even at Riley's prepubescent age, entertain their potential queerness like this all the time. They experience things like this at an age where puberty hormones barely even factored into the equation, and kind of crave to see how that can be interpreted when it comes to proper representation. The reason why we never see that exploration in queer characters that young, however, is because heteronormativity coats queerness in a paint that constantly displays it as something inherently sexual and mature. So much that they don't even acknowledge that there's some beautiful looking hardwood floors underneath all of those years of paint. Because that's what Riley is shaping up to be in Dream Productions according to what we've seen and both the subtext and color schemes Pixar displays. The various use of blue, pink, and purple in the opening credits hinting at her possibly being bisexual or biromantic. Why the teenage version of herself looks the way that she does, blue hair and all. Even the dress that she ends up wearing to the actual dance is very reflective of another popular bisexual animated character that Disney fought tooth and claw to keep in the closet, Luz from the Owl House. Pixar found ways of showing us that Riley's queerness exists, even with the extremely short leash Disney had them on. Now, keep in mind that I got all of this out of Riley as a character, despite the show being focused on Paula, Janelle, and Zenny, and how their work influences her. All that, and I could still see how this aspect of the show basically solidifies the critique Pixar was making about Disney since the first episode. But does Disney? The answer to that question, unfortunately, is yes. They are aware that this show is just a critique. They just don't care. They haven't cared since they started acquiring companies in the 90s, and they especially don't care now. Because unless the elitist execs in charge are either replaced with either better company runners or a better system that prioritizes progression over profit, Disney will always be the company that only allows queer media when they know they can benefit from it, can easily use its inclusion as the scapegoat for why something bombed, and isn't afraid to put it back in the closet when the profits aren't up to snuff, or, as of the 47th presidency of the United States, whenever it's told to. And I know they don't care, because if they truly did, for the right reasons, even the way the show is now wouldn't have made it to Disney+. Even the final cut of Dream Productions told a lot about how not just Disney, but a lot of studios in Hollywood behave when it comes to progression and the like. No, instead, they looked at what Pixar had to offer, saw the metaphor and the comparisons clear as day, and got that the allegory was about them, but saw that they could still get some money out of this if they put it behind a paywall. Because Disney is so huge at this point that even if they were given an art piece that literally says Disney is the devil, they'd look at the font and overall design of the sentence and go, we can make money off of this. That's why, if you have the money to do so, Disney gives you the exclusive opportunity to be subjective about an art piece made with the subjectivation of the piece's owner in mind, let alone anything else currently going on against heteronormative conservatism. Bringing it back to Riley, as long as there's no visual representation of queerness present and the audience is assured that there's blatant heteronormativity behind their actions, people are free to look at the less than subtle subtext of said character in order to associate them with being queer. But if there is queerness, actual queerness, that is just as blatant as the executively mandated heteronormativity, those same Disney execs tell Pixar to cut it out. This was the case even with Pixar's upcoming Disney Plus show, Win or Lose, when Pixar was forced to cut out a transgender storyline for one of the characters in the show and told Pixar to make them cis. And it's not just queer representation that Disney is restricting Pixar on. They're being restrictive in how Pixar discusses other important social issues as well. In their upcoming movie Hoppers, where a girl gets her mind transferred into a robot beaver to infiltrate the animal kingdom, Disney execs told them to go light on the quote-unquote themes of environmentalism. Especially considering how well DreamWorks' The Good Robot did in the box office, all while handling the importance of wildlife and greenery in the face of oligarchy, letting Pixar go this route with Hoppers would have been a no-brainer for Disney. You know, until you realize that Disney is in the pocket of an actual real-life oligarchy and doesn't want Pixar to blatantly tell on them. Just subtly though. Because just like Disney handled those situations, both real and fiction, that's how the overall message of Dream Productions felt to me at the end of the day. All of these parallels made to show how movie studios look at progression if it messes with their bottom dollar were so brilliantly focused on, and the allegory was completely clear on everyone. Especially how they handled the in-studio translation of "going woke almost killed us, so we will now enforce a strict status quo."
You will not deviate from the written word. No changes, no flourishes. You are to direct scripts as is.
But at the end of the day, it was Zenny being forced to admit that his vision of Riley isn't something the world is ready for, when it absolutely is. All part of them coming to one accord with the Disney allegory herself, Paula, telling the lie that the company can truly be what the company says it can be if it weren't for those pesky studio execs keeping all the magic locked away in the Disney vault. And while it was done in a way that you never would have noticed narrative-wise if you weren't truly paying attention thanks to the visualization of what happens when you lucid dream, the publicly released ending basically told us that if it weren't for those pesky executives getting in the way, Paula, aka Disney, with Janelle sacrificing her career to serve as the medium between herself and Zenny, could make the studio the most magical place in Riley once more. And keep in mind that Dream Productions was both made and released before the 47th presidential cabinet got in the White House, let alone elected. So Disney producing this type of ending for a Disney Plus show spinning off from another potential Pixar franchise completely predates them bending the knee by forcing the changes to Win or Lose and Hoppers. They did this knowing people would see the allegory, knowing people would see the parallels, knowing people would be able to tell that the ending was corporate middle ground bullshit. But because Disney knew they could still make money off of it in ways that reduced the risk of them telling on themselves, they did it anyway. The gag here, readers, is that I wouldn't be surprised if I found out that the ending we got, in order to get the conclusion we got, was Pixar's plan all along. Once again, readers, Dream Productions could have easily been a movie instead. The reason why it isn't is because the metaphor it used to allegorize Disney was strong enough to realize that more people would make the association if it were, so they put it behind a paywall. It's cleverly written into the initial story. It's incredibly easy to see when you compare Riley experiencing potential queerness to how Disney handles queer representation IRL, and it shows the means the company will go through to make sure it stays on the good side of those in power. I mean, considering how quickly Disney is cooperating with the 2025 Trump administration with their most recent decisions in regards to Pixar's upcoming films, it was impossible for me to not immediately dwell on that after watching Paula scapegoat Zenny. Did the initial ending with the lucid dream sequence make me feel good? Of course. Do I wish that Disney would just let Riley be queer like all the creatives responsible for how we relate to Riley that have worked on this franchise want her to be? Absolutely. As a fellow bisexual, I know my people when I see them. Whether or not I ever see that happen, however, especially from Disney nowadays, remains to be seen, especially when creatives like Gravity Falls' Alex Hirsch and Owl House's Dana Terrace, real-life Janelles that dared to bring something fresh, new, and progressive to the Disney name had their work stunted because Disney thought they were going too zenny too fast, but have absolutely no problem promoting the attempts made at progression on their appropriate months. Because unlike Riley's Head, Dream Productions isn't the only place the Janelles out here can truly thrive. And just like I appreciate a story about how one Janelle is trapped in the system, I can also appreciate all the Janelles that refuse to sacrifice their creativity for the sake of capitalistic consistency. But I digress, readers. Your homework assignment for the day. Write in the comment section below what you thought of Inside Out's Dream Productions if you've seen it. Or if you feel like sharing with the rest of the class, write in the comment section below a film or a television show that you've seen where you just knew the story would have been absolutely thought-provoking if studio interference didn't get in the way because they had to stop the creative from putting their business out there. Whichever question you decide to answer, I'd love to know your thoughts. Also, once again, if you want to hear my thoughts on the 2 Inside Out movies and where it's possibly going as a franchise on my second channel, Readus 201, click the video at the end card. A huge shout out to my patrons, both big and small, for helping make this channel possible. Make sure you check out the card at the end of the video to join, or click the link to it or any of my affiliates in the description box below. But until then, this is Readus 101. Class dismissed.